Hello everyone. In this video I want to share how I create content that actually lands and feels authentic. I've made thousands of videos to YouTube, over 16 years of doing it, and a lot of these videos have felt fake and many of them have felt authentic. So in this video I want to share the 5 particular problems that I faced. I hope you guys enjoy. Let's get into it. Recently, somebody told me that it's not the words you say in a video that makes viewers resonate with you, it's the joy you felt from making the video that people really feel. So let's get into the first problem, which was I was speaking from theory, not experience. I have made videos from theory, and this led to it feeling forced, like I had to really fight to get my words out, so it felt draining. And my claims were not based on evidence, so it lacked value. For example, in this video, I remember talking about a concept, and there are dozens of videos on my channel like this, and the speaking felt rushed. My chest, it felt tight, and my throat felt blocked. And this led to my breathing feeling quite shallow, which led to a messy mind. Like, because I was feeling tight trying to create the video, my mind just felt congested, and I was trying to come up with thoughts when my mind was already messy. And the effect of this was that I barely got any views. It was draining, and I didn't even enjoy making the video. Now, here's another video I made. I had been talking to viewers and I shared some things with them. I reacted to their content. And in this video, I felt sincere and genuine. It felt practical because I was engaging with other people, and this video got 350,000 views, and it was enjoyable to make. And this taught me that actually speaking skills are an illusion, because this is not the problem. It's a lack of authenticity. If I feel inauthentic in my content, then that leads to my physical body feeling tensed up. So what makes this hard? Well, first, there is a fear of rejection. So it's hard to speak from experience because it's like, oh, what if my experience isn't enough? What if I need to keep getting experience and experience? And this leads to it being hard to talk about it because you're maybe, like me, you feel scared of having a fear of rejection about that. And that also means like there's this insecurity about the opportunity to really deliver value because you don't think you have good experience. But actually, all of us have experience. Like if you've done anything in your childhood, if you've lived a day, then that means you've had a day where you had thoughts. Every day has its obstacles. And on top of that, you can do experiments. So an experiment is where you say, hey, I don't have experience in this area. Like, I'm not good at speaking, or I'm not good at drawing or something like that. But I'm going to make YouTube videos documenting my progress. That is something that you can do so that you're still speaking from experience. You don't have to have achieved all these outcomes just so that you can speak from experience. You can run an experiment and take people with you along the way. So this means don't be afraid to create and share, even if you feel like your experience is not enough. And be cringe. Like a lot of people treat that as an obstacle, but really being cringe is the path to making YouTube content. And a YouTube channel is a story in and of itself. When I look at a YouTube channel, I don't look at one video. I look at the overall story of that channel. I look at where somebody started and how they developed. And I love that journey. So be cringe, because that is how you create a story. That is how you make your YouTube channel or your social media a journey for other viewers. So the second problem is that I tried to make stale bread fresh. So like, for example, I have thousands of video ideas. I've written down epiphanies. I have taken countless screenshots, and I have gigabytes of footage that I made a note to myself to look at later. Now, that's great and all, but what that led to was a creative process that actively repelled me and felt emotionally flat. I didn't want to do the content. It felt like the excitement dried up. So the bread was stale, and I didn't want to buy a new loaf of bread. And the idea can come back. So for example, Rod Serling was a producer, and he wrote an episode called The Time Element, And basically, in 1957, he had this really good idea for a TV episode. But the networks rejected it. So it sat unused. It was shelved and nothing happened to it. Then, like a year later, this producer named Burt Granite got it onto a big TV series, and then it blew up. So basically, this producer looked through an old pile of scripts and decided, oh, this can work, and it blew up. So the idea doesn't have to be used right away. Sometimes I have held myself back from exploring new ideas because I was just limiting myself to old ones. So what makes this hard? Dead energy can be romanticized if we have already invested an emotional attachment to it. This means that the antidote is detaching from the past, being honest with ourselves about what we can really do next, and being patient. Because when you explore a new idea, it means, going through a process of letting old ones die so you can explore new ones. So the action I recommend for this is feedback loops. So let's talk about feedback loops now, because this was the third problem I faced, was avoiding this. I stayed blindfolded. I stayed alone. I'm going to explain this feedback loop. And without a feedback process, it feels like you're talking to a camera. It's like, what am I even saying? Who am I really talking to? With a feedback process, it feels like you're talking to a person. This makes the content land, and it feels like you're actually speaking to someone. So in this case, like, I have made so many of these videos just did not feel good. Like, they felt unnatural. And if you looked at my camera roll before actually publishing some of these, there have been hundreds of takes. I would record for an hour, even 2 hours sometimes, just to condense that down and edit it into like 6 to 8 minutes of actual content. There was all of this fluff, all of this extra trying. And this was because I was ideating in solitude and didn't build muscle on the skill of actually just iterating and building momentum. So, what is a feedback loop? Well, I like to see it as 3 phases. There's inputs, outputs, and feedback. In other words, you have consumption, where you ingest all this information, all of this ideation. And then second, there is contribution, where there are outputs. You just start putting things out, you see what happens when you share. And then lastly, you get feedback. You let things settle, you subtract all of the noise and see what signal remains. So it's almost like casting a wide net. You get all of these fish, and then you filter out and you get the good fish, and that is the fish that gets delivered to the restaurant. So let's talk about what this actually looks like in terms of how I created my content and how I'm doing it now. So like consumption is stuff like watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, reading books, and revisiting these old ideas from my notes and my watch later videos or my screenshots. Another thing I like to do is explore different industries. What's happening with music? What's happening with AI? What's happening with like cars? Because when you cross-pollinate different industries, it allows you to come up with new ideas that are just much more creative. Because a lot of people, if they're creating like finance content, for example, then they only consume finance content. And the result is like it's so specific and it lacks any diversity or variety. So I like to see what happens if I just consume totally different cultures, like radically different industries, so that you can cross-pollinate. And once or twice per month, I spend some hours just consuming information like a lion. Like I can watch videos endlessly and read for a long time. And I do that like once or twice per month. So I still like to consume throughout the day, but I do that maybe like an hour, but usually less than an hour throughout the day. And then let's talk about contribution. So with contribution, this is stuff like engaging in comments. So in a social media comment section, you can ask people questions, you can see what other people are saying and respond to questions. Like maybe I don't know if the post is good or if it's a good comment to even leave, but instead of overthinking it, I can just contribute and throw spaghetti at the wall. Every day I try to contribute. I try to be much more of a contributor than a consumer. Like consumer is just a fraction of it. Contribution is probably the 90%. Subtraction is so important because it allows you to let the mud settle and actually extract the parts that you personally resonate with. So for me, I need time to just do nothing. Doing nothing could mean sleeping, walking, meditating, staring at a wall, or just hanging out with friends and family, maybe playing a board game, and letting my mind just be totally off of the problem that I'm trying to work through. So every day, I generally do this for like 2 hours. And then one day throughout the week, I have the full day to just relax and I don't do any work. So at this point, I've taken in a lot of chaos and then I've practiced and seen what I like to do personally and just what feels authentic to me. And then I let that get balanced out by just having a subtraction period where I let all of the noise settle and see what kind of stuff my heart really likes to keep. So why is this hard? Well, the feedback loop that I just described involves building publicly. And there can be a fear of building publicly and this belief that we need to figure everything out in our minds before we can actually try things. So I recommend building momentum through iteration. I have found that I cannot build momentum if I am stuck in my mind. Action is the only thing that can actually build momentum, and failure isn't even a thing. It's the whole point of the process. Like, think about someone who's sculpting. The whole point is getting rid of the fluff so that they can reveal the sculpture. So the only way you can actually reveal that is through iterating and letting the imperfections go away through action. The fourth mistake that I definitely made was I drowned in the meaningless 90%. As Pareto says, roughly 80% of the results really come from 20% of the actual inputs. So what do I mean? For example, I used to burn like 10 to 15 hours focused on making like a fancy and flashy video with the right transitions and flashy editing, and I let the thumbnail and title basically become an afterthought. So this led to me creating a bunch of videos where I put in so much work that didn't even perform well because I was putting in effort just onto the most low leverage parts of the process. As you can see, I have a bunch of videos that I actually unlisted because even though the production might have been good, the value wasn't there. And actually, I went to film school, one of the best film universities in America. And we had this project, and when my teacher looked at my final project, she gave me some feedback, and she told me, I feel like this is way too flashy. I do not feel like the story is there. I had spent a lot of time on this project, but this totally taught me the importance of focusing on the right things, on focusing on the actual story and the message. So I reminded myself that for a video to be successful, 3 things need to happen. Someone needs to click on it, they need to watch it, and they need to keep watching it. This means that there are only a few things that actually matter. The most important parts of a video are this: the idea, the writing, having a good hook and a good story and valuable message, having good lighting, having good audio, and having a good title and thumbnail. These are the highest leverage parts of the process because without these things, you could have great production, but this is what actually matters. So the most trivial parts of a video are things like unrelated storylines, especially as I started to create more talking head videos where I was casually talking to the camera. I noticed this need that I had to keep talking. So I just started rambling. And I had all these unrelated storylines to just continue saying things. And even though I was saying things, did anything really matter? No. So random facts and unrelated storylines are not valuable. Also, baseless guesswork. Instead of speaking out of theory, I started to focus more on speaking out of actual experience. And then also excessive flashy editing it doesn't actually move the needle. There can be a time to focus on what's flashy, but like what happened to me at film school, it's just not what ultimately moves the needle. So what makes it hard to actually focus on these tasks? When I make videos now, I feel less burdened because I'm focused more on the 10 to 20% of the important inputs. And this felt weird, and I'm still working through this because there's all this societal conditioning around work. Like it has to be intense and unenjoyable. And I think a lot of us are conditioned to think that it just has to suck, like we can't enjoy it. But really, if we're going to work hard, we might as well work hard on the things that are more important. And the action step is before you start doing trivial tasks, like if I'm editing a video and before I obsess over getting really involved with the editing, I would catch myself and I would think, will this have the highest contribution towards my goal? Like if I'm trying to make a great video that people will click on, watch, and keep watching, is this the thing that I need to be doing? You could apply this to anything. Like if you're going to the gym, I've seen people do these forearm exercises, these really minuscule like hand exercises. Is that what ultimately will have the highest contribution to having a fit body? Because usually if you do squats, push-ups, and sit-ups, those are the most important parts, or whatever those compound exercises are that really help you develop a better physique, for example. Now, the last problem that I'll talk about here is operating from chaos. It is very hard to make a video when you are stuck in your mind and you're having all sorts of thoughts, and that's how you're scripting, and that's how you're trying to do the recording. I was in an improv class a while back, and my teacher told me, once I have taught you everything in this class, I want you to forget everything I said. Improvisation is all about just doing stuff on the fly, in the spur of the moment. That is impossible to do well if you're thinking about it. So this is what my teacher meant. And that is the thing about knowledge. Knowledge is limited, but imagination embraces the entire world. Nothing good has been created without leveraging this exciting power of imagination, and it's nearly impossible to access without play. Some of the best inventions, like even the laws of gravity and how Newton just had this apple experience, none of these great inventions and products happened without play. Mozart is known to be extremely playful. He was not this dead serious person. He was an insane optimist, and he lived every day with play. Albert Einstein, even though he was a mathematician, he was playful. He used his imagination. He didn't try to think through his formulas specifically using his intellect. It was actually a remarkably intuitive process. And this is definitely the same for Steve Jobs. He talks a lot about how the experience needs to feel intuitive and playful. Now, obviously, we talk a lot about how important the mind is, but for the mind to have access to explore all of the options and ideas out there, it needs a sense of calmness, and it needs to be at like a high vibration. And that happens when we're having fun. So if you think about some of the ideas you've had when you're stressed, your mind is full of thoughts and it's very narrow. To sum it up, when I'm stuck in my mind, when I'm focused on outputs instead of the process, and when I am comparing myself to others, I create the worst content. When I am having fun, I create the best content. It's authentic, it's enjoyable, and people actually enjoy it much more. So this can look like all sorts of different creative exercises. And before I get into just doing a lot of work, I actually do something creative, like play my instrument or go for a walk or something. There are a bunch of examples like cooking, drawing, practicing, singing, dancing, sculpting, etc. We don't need to figure things out. Even if we are feeling stressed out and we're trying to tackle a problem, we are allowed to step away from it and just do something fun. And the action I recommend is have play, like have some sort of creative activity, whether it's an instrument or drawing or cooking or something, and do it just to have fun. The second thing I recommend is that we talk a lot about output-based goals in society, like how much money we want to make or how many followers we want to get. And I think this can help for setting the overall destination, but overall, I recommend experimenting with input-based goals. So for example, I spend 90 minutes on content creation, or I spend 90 minutes reaching out to friends, or I spend 90 minutes commenting. These are input-based goals. Or even just I spend 10 minutes working out. That is a goal that you can actually be held accountable to, because you don't have to wait until the output actually happens to be held accountable. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. The main takeaways are these 5 points. First, instead of speaking conceptually and out of theory, speak from experience and reflect on what you are doing or have done. Second, build publicly. There's a lot of fear to show other people our imperfect creations, but I have made a lot of videos in isolation, and I can guarantee that building publicly is the best way to actually work with feedback that helps your videos get better. Third, enter the unfamiliar. It is impossible to solve problems with the same level of consciousness that you originally encountered the problem with, which means exploring chaos, exploring the unfamiliar, and extracting the nuggets that raise your baseline so that you can create new content, create with new ideas. Fourth thing, focus on what actually moves the needle instead of sharing unrelated storylines with people. And lastly, the backbone of creation is around fun. This is not like optional luxury. It's what drives the actual process. And if we're focused on the outputs all the time and we're not focused on inputs, then not only does our quality suffer, but the results actually are worse, even though that's exactly what we're trying to achieve. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. And if you want to talk to me and join our community of members, there is a link in the description to connect. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and definitely leave a comment if you like this sort of content and want to see anything similar. Peace out.